Right. Right, so welcome everyone. It's really nice to have you here. I'm going to talk from our experience as a very small charity in East London in Dagenham, which is Barking and Dagenham is one of the most deprived areas of the country, one of the most deprived boroughs of London. And we've been operating there for around 20 years. And the particular project that I work on is Open Doors Project, and it's part of Community Resources, which is the name of our charity. And I just want to talk about how we have seen over the years how for people, particularly for mums with new babies, but not exclusively that, how we have seen their well-being really improve as they've found a place of belonging. So if we could have the next slide, please, Georgia. Okay, so originally this project came out of the work of Lifeline Church in Dagenham, and the vision that we have is to combat isolation through community. And when we talk about community, we're talking about real and trusted relationships. And the thing that we find, which I'm sure this is not new to you, I'm sure that you recognise this, but a lot of people who are isolated either have no real relationships, friendships, or those that they do have are very damaging. So that's really where we're coming from. Next slide, please. Okay. So you can just put all of these bullet points up at once, Georgia. Thank you. So I wanted to just start off by talking about isolation. Again, I mean, I'm sure that many of you, I don't want to assume that this is new. I'm sure that you're very aware of this, but I think it was a surprise when I first started in this work. It was surprising to me to recognise that loneliness and social isolation is as damaging as these other things that are listed here. So, we would probably, if you put people in a room and said, what are the risk factors for premature death, you would probably get the obesity, the substance abuse, poor access to healthcare, etc. I'm wondering how many people would actually come up with loneliness and isolation as a risk factor. So that is huge, and something that we have a real passion to see if that we can help with that. Next slide, please. This research is quite old now, but I think still is important. So the loneliness is as big a killer as obesity and as dangerous as heavy smoking. It's not new, but it's good to remind ourselves of that. Next slide, thank you. And I just love this quote about the chicken soup. So in modern hospitals where everything is scrupulously tracked and recorded, we can now see the relationship between identical procedures, recovery times, and the number of visitors a patient has. The more visitors a patient has, the faster their wounds heal and the sooner they can be sent home. It's not the chicken soup that makes you better, it's the person who brings you the soup. And I just think that speaks so clearly about the need that people have for relationships and friendships. And I think just to be reminded of that, it's, you can have the best operating hospitals, you can have everything is scrupulously clean, everything is done really well, but it's still going to be that relationship that really helps people feel that sense of well-being. Next slide. Okay, right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our story here. So this began for me with a friend who, she phoned me one day. So we're going back to, I think it was 2000 or 1999. And she phoned me saying, Sally, I really need your help. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's happened? Has a car broken down? Has some accident happened? But basically she was at the school gates picking up her young son who'd just started nursery. and she met two women from Pakistan, and they were talking about how they were going to get together and help each other learn to read English. And my friend said, oh, I could help you, and then invited them to her house and said, I'll help you learn English. And then went home, had a meltdown moment, phoned me and said, oh my goodness, I've told these women that I can help them learn English. I don't have a clue. I can speak English, but I don't know how to teach people. And I, at that point, was on maternity leave from, I used to be a teacher and I used to teach English, but I taught children in secondary school how to write stories and essays and things. So it's quite a large jump for me to think, I can help people learn English. Anyway, I said to her, okay, well, I'll come. And I met with her and these two women in her home, and we kind of fumbled our way through, and we taught them a bit of English, and they were really grateful. And the problem is they then started bringing their friends who also wanted to learn English. And my friend lived in quite a small house with a small front room, which gradually got fuller and fuller of women who then brought their children. And they're like, yes, okay, come teach us English, you lovely English teachers. And we're thinking, oh my goodness, you know that thing about imposter syndrome, where you just really don't have a clue. Anyway, we carried on, and it was the same time as the Kosovan crisis. And we ended up with a lot of women coming who had fled from that war. In our area, there's a lot of Asian people living, so we had a real mixture of different nationalities, and it just seemed to work, and we seemed to be doing something that was meeting a need. And one of the things that we recognized was, yes, it was about learning English, but actually it was about connection. And they would bring us their letters because they didn't understand, what the letter meant. They would ask us to phone the GP to make an appointment. We had lots of immigration things that we needed to find out about. And we kept saying, we're not experts, we don't know. But what we did as this developed was we just recognised that often what people need is to walk alongside them. Now, I recognise I'm not talking specifically here about maternal issues. I'm not talking maternity issues. I'm not talking about mums and babies at this point. I just want you to see that this is all part of a bigger picture that is to do with isolation. And so for us, that's really where it all began. We were able to move into a school classroom because there was a new school that had opened down the road, and they let us use that. We were then able to move to a church hall. We then began to work with a local college and deliver ESOL, which is English for speakers of other languages. But the particular point that I was interested in was that thing about the loneliness and isolation. So that really became the root for me. How can we address that? How can we make it easier for people who are in crisis or isolated? How can we help them develop the confidence and the skills to be able to operate in a society which really is very difficult when you feel very alone? So that's kind of the background. Next slide, please. Oh, 2 more bullet points. Sorry, can you just go back? Sorry, Georgia. Yeah. Okay, yes. So I forgot the bit about the training volunteers. As we developed, we began to train volunteers. We offered a mixture of activities and one-to-one support. So we would do things like English classes because we got better at teaching English and we got some qualifications. And then we would do things like cooking classes and craft classes, lunches. And at the moment we have a centre where all of those things are operating. We have a huge lunch club that feeds a lot of people each week. We have lots of different things going on. And then one of the things that then began to happen was we started to get referrals. and we began to develop a relationship with local professionals, which I'll tell you more about. So can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so 2008, we got our first referral from the perinatal infant mental health service at our local hospital. She was and is to this day an absolutely amazing practitioner. She was working, particularly at that time, she had 4 mums, African mums, that she was working with, that she was really interested in how not only did they need her counselling and her therapy, but they needed friends. And she said to us, the mums needed sisters and the children needed cousins. And so I began to think, what would happen if I introduced these isolated mums that I was working with to one another? Would it provide that extra thing, that magic ingredient that I can't provide? She said, you know, I would love to be their friend. I would love to phone them up and see how they're getting on. Obviously, it's beyond my professional remit. Can't do it. Haven't got the time. But I really know that these mums need connection. So how can I widen that? How can I find good people to introduce them to? Is there a safe place where this could happen? So we began to work with her. Well, first of all, she introduced these 4 mums to each other, and she began to observe what was happening as they began to develop friendships between them, and their children began to develop friendships. And then she said, could we do this wider? And so then we began to work together and see how that could happen. So that was really the first point for us, where we recognized this wider issue of loneliness and isolation is something that really affects many new mums, actually many new mums who in many ways would just seem very ordinary. You know, maybe they've been professionals and then they stop working for a while and suddenly they're mums. I know for me that was a big issue. It's like I had been Sally the teacher. Everything was like, yes, I know what I'm doing, and then suddenly I have this tiny human being and it's like, oh, okay, now my whole world is wrapped up in this tiny baby, and suddenly my professional relationships have gone and I haven't got that teacher title. Well, I have still got that title, but it doesn't actually really mean anything to this tiny human. So for me, it was a big change, a big adjustment, and I took some time. But what if you are traumatized because of your past, or you've been in, you know, a domestic abuse situation, or you're new into the area, you don't speak the language, you don't know the culture, and you have a new baby? Everything is just emphasized even more. So that's really then where we began to think, you know, how can what we have learned so far be applied in this situation? Next slide, please. So I want to show you a clip of the very first woman who was referred to us. She was one of these 4 African mums that I'm talking about. And the question I want to give to you is, as she's talking, what do you hear? So I'm thinking about, you know, what do you hear about the needs that she's expressing? What do you hear about the things that worked? What are the ingredients for her that enabled her life to start to change? Now, I will emphasize that not every situation has had such an amazing outcome, but I think her story is inspiring. So let's hear from Kudzai. Thanks, Georgia.
So I was in a very vulnerable place. had a child who had special needs, pregnant, in a bad relationship where the man was very abusive. I was very depressed, very powerless, nowhere to turn to, no one to talk to, and hopeless. When I went to the hospital for the checks, I was very, very tiny, and they thought I was self-harming. And I weighed 43 kgs as a pregnant woman, because they thought that if I was self-harming, they could take away my baby, or if I agreed to psychotherapy counseling, then they'll help me. I agreed to go with this psychotherapy because I wanted to keep my baby. The psychotherapy was godsend in a way that she tried to help me realize the situation that I was in an abusive relationship, and I needed people who can actually help me, and I needed to get out of the situation that I was in because I was hanging on to the situation that I was in. So my psychotherapist referred me to Open Doors, started introducing me to people. I couldn't believe that there are people who could take away my laundry, or bring me food, or just want to help play with my kids, because it had never happened to me. The friends that they introduced me to, they were really amazing. They've been there in my life. Like today as I speak, I'm living in their house, trying to save up money to buy a house. So Sally Dixon helped me go to social services. She helped me speak to the people in the council, and I managed to get a house in Hainault, where everyone helped in the church, helped me move, and they were really supportive. I wanted to do something for my children. I wanted to be a role model for my children. So I did go back to school. So I studied as a nurse, and I'm currently a nurse, and I can say a sister, a junior sister in A&E. And also I did learn how to drive. It didn't take me time. And I do have a license as well. As a result of having a job, I've been able to look after my children, clothe them, feed them, take them to clubs that they want to go on holidays, visit friends and family, and just have a social life and be happy.
Okay. One of the things that that's part of a much longer video that she recorded, and I didn't have time to show all of it, but at the end she talks about how now she wants to help other women in a similar position. And for me, with the people that we work with, whether or not it's a mum like Kudzai, or whether it's an older person or a guy, it doesn't really matter. One of the things that we're always looking for is that person wants to give back, because I think so often we see people as people with needs and not as people who can also help others and bring solutions. And I think Kudzai is such a good example of that. This was recorded a few years ago, and she's actually now a senior sister at our local hospital in A&E. Really, really amazing, and has a real desire to help others, and really happy to tell her story. And if any of you did want to talk to her more, I know she'd be more than happy to do that. So you could just always email me and we could set something up. Georgia, are we able just to unmute people for a while and just see if anybody has any comments or any questions about any of that?
Yeah, I think everyone can mute and unmute themselves, but I'll stop sharing so that you can see each other a bit better.
Okay. Let's just take 2 or 3 minutes, and if you've got any queries or questions, if I've not been clear, or if there's anything about Kudzai, particularly around that, what did you hear in her story? I think that would be really good for us just to take a few minutes just to kind of chat about that.
So I'm a baby loss counsellor. So for me, that hearing her say about how the talking therapy helped her to make decisions, and that was really beneficial to hear. It's nice because you don't hear it very often.
I know. I have to say, knowing this particular psychotherapist, I mean, she is amazing, and she really does seem to just have that amazing skill to work with these women. But time and time again, the women that she's referred to as have just said that was the starting point for them, realizing actually my life can turn around. I think it's about hope.
Yeah.
Actually, people. Thanks, Elsa. Anyone else?
I work as an assistant psychologist, but I also work in a perinatal mental health team, but I work in the systemic family therapy pathway as well. So it was really good and amazing to see how building that system around her and a really supportive system around her was so beneficial in her sort of individual recovery as well. And then that later on, she was empowered to help other people. That was really powerful to see.
Yeah. I mean, again, when we work with, well, let me tell you something. There's something once a social worker said to me, which I quote a lot actually. So she asked me this question: how long do you work with your clients for? So I said to her, well, actually, I don't really talk about working with people. We talk about walking with. So I think, is it Neharika? Am I pronouncing it? Neharika, sorry. So I think what you're saying, we talk about walking with people, and so exactly what you're saying about building some things around people to help support them, not doing it for them, is really important. So when she said to me, how long do you work with your clients for? So we don't really work with people. We do walk with them through their journey. We don't actually call them clients because we're not a service. So we do refer to them as people or mums, or, you know, but they're not really clients to us. And in terms of how long are we there for? Well, because our focus is on helping people build relationship and find belonging, we're there for as long as it takes. It's not like, okay, you've done your 6 weeks, off you go, because that just doesn't make any sense, because you're actually talking about trying to help people find a place of belonging. So I think that it's like that scaffolding around a person is just so key, but you have to have, for a lot of people, they need the service as well. So it's not that one is more important than the other. I think it's just that sometimes we can see one without the other, and I think it can help. But I think the power is recognizing how can services and community organizations, churches, anywhere where there's a safe, supportive community, how can those work together and build something really strong? I don't think we should be looking either or. I think it's both and. So thanks. Yeah, good point. Anyone else?
I just loved hearing that sort of change in a sort of self-esteem, you know, how she viewed herself to start off with, that almost incredulous that people were going to be there to help her, and then sort of by the end of that she's sort of quite humble by saying, this is what I've achieved and this is what I've done now. I just loved hearing that change.
Yeah. I mean, she said about the washing, so that was the first time we took her washing. She'd managed to get it washed, but then it was in this bin bag, and because she didn't have anywhere to dry it. And I said, well, don't worry, it's fine, we'll just wash it for you. And she's gone, oh, I feel really bad. And I remember saying to her, look, at the moment, this is what you need, so we'll help. It won't always be like this. There will be a time where you're helping someone else. And, you know, I just remember that conversation, and now she's helping people all the time. And it was just for a season. She needed just that help up the ladder, but now she's in that position where she can help others. And I think it's so important for us to respect people's dignity. It's not, we can't be, oh, I'll sort it out for you, don't worry, I'll do it, because we're all people with we don't want to be charity cases, we don't want to be done to. So that whole thing of just walking alongside someone, really developing a sensitivity to hear what's going to help and encouraging them, giving them that spark of hope, I think is really important. It's funny, I thought you might challenge me. I thought you might pick up the thing about where she said, I'm now living with one of these friends. Did you pick that bit up? Because one of the things that we've had over the years is, oh, boundaries, oh, be careful, you know. And yes, obviously, you have to be careful. And for us, it's very different. You know, we're not a service. And what we talk about, our remit is really, we will help you find friends. We will help you find a place of belonging. So we introduced her to a particular family who, they're just lovely. So the husband is a primary school head teacher. Mum used to be a midwife, and they had 3 kids. And they'd spent I think 4 years out in Sierra Leone doing some work out there. But they just have this amazing ability to open up their home. They've had lots of people living with them over the years, and they're now respite foster carers. But at that, they got to know Kudzai and the kids, and because we'd introduced them to them as their kind of link family. And then as the relationship grew, and Kudzai was saying, she started to work, and she said, I'd really like to be able to buy a house eventually. And they said, well, why don't you move in with us? We'll charge you a very nominal rent, and you can start to save. And I can't remember how long she lived with them, but it was an amazing time because they were able to really invest in her and in the kids. Richard, the dad, he used to read their bedtime story, you know, little tiny things like that just was able to give them that father role that they hadn't had. And she was able to save the money, and then eventually she was able to buy a flat. And I think I would say that probably that, more than anything else, apart from the psychotherapy, I would say that was the thing that really changed things for her kids. Okay, we better go back into the presentation, please, Georgia. Okay, so next slide. Okay, right, so this one is two mums who are we're involved with at the moment. Now, they haven't got tiny babies, but I think they're like little toddlers now. But the reason why I wanted to share this is because for both of these mums, they've gone through some things, and their desire is to help others. So they have set up, they come to one of the parent toddler groups that we run on a Thursday, and then they wanted to do more. So they really want to try to help mums with their well-being, and they've just applied for some money and been successful in that. It's only £1,000, but it's a start. They've set up a group on a Friday morning, and they're particularly focusing on mums who are finding things quite hard, because they said to us, they said, if we just meet them all over the place, everywhere we go, there's a mum who's struggling. And I think there's a post-pandemic thing at work. There's also the whole thing about change of role. There's stuff about trauma, all the things that I've already touched on. But I just wanted you to see here that these mums are doing something about it. They're trying to be proactive. So the first one, Kat, she's one of the mums who's setting up the group. The other one, Shannon, is one of the mums who's coming to the group. But really, it's interesting. She's getting more and more interested in, oh, how can I help others? So, yeah, let's just watch this clip.
Okay, so Kat, tell me why you're doing this group.
Hi. Obviously, I met lots of moms in different play groups, and I saw that lots of moms have things to talk, and they're struggling to talk with people. So that more often you meet them, that more trust they found in you, they see you as a family. So I saw to bring them all from the different groups on one table. So we came here, we opened a group, and I see my friends now. They're coming regularly, we sit, we talk, we feel home, we feel familiar. And like I have 2 friends that come from far away, and they just come because of me, because they know I'm here, I'm sitting, you can talk to me, and there's lots of moms who need to talk.
All right, so Kat, just tell me a bit about your own experience and what it was like.
So I come from a different country, from Germany, and first of all, I struggled with the language first. I learned the language, so I started going then to the communities, to play groups, and it's not everyone wants to talk to you. Not everyone accepts you like you are. So when you find a person and you can trust, you go to that person back, you come back, you ask, let's meet up, let's have a coffee. And that's the beginning. That's the beginning, to ask someone, do you want to see me? Do you want to go out with me? So I feel like to make even the first step. Not everyone can do the first step, but since I learned the language and I can communicate, I feel more better to have my own community, to meet with my people, with my friends. And even if I meet someone new, I will tell them, listen, I have my group. Do you want to join me? Just come and we sit and talk. And a language problem is an issue as well, because you can't speak to everyone. As soon as this is broken and you have someone you can invite, it makes you more feeling better, I think.
So just tell me then, tell me what life was like before you started coming here.
So usually I go to baby groups on my own, and I do like going places on my own, and I'm completely comfortable with that. But then sometimes I have days where I don't want to go out. So I suffer with fibromyalgia, and I also have a sinus condition where I get migraines a lot. So when I am in pain, like last night I was in a lot of pain, the next day I'm so tired that I don't want to do anything. I get a bit depressed and I get a bit in a rut and I don't want to go out. But like today, Kat has convinced me to come along. She tried convincing me to come yesterday, which was the baby group, but I felt a little bit too overwhelmed with too many people and I didn't want to go. But today she convinced me to come because I thought I could just sit and have a cup of tea. The baby can play, and I don't have to do too much. I can sit down and have a cup of tea was the main driving force for me to get out.
Would you say it's making a difference?
I think it's making a lot of a difference because I think we're all from different backgrounds. So we even down to what we eat is different, how we parent might be different, the advice that we can give to each other is very different, and a lot of the time you can stay, you know, my whole family is English, so I only get an English point of view and recipes and ways of parenting my child. But you know, we have people from Germany, Romania, Latvia, so we have so many different recipes and different ideas and different point of views that we can all share.
Okay. Georgia, can we just go back to just have us all together again so we can just chat for a couple of minutes? Thanks. And can you, Georgia, can you tell me where we're at with time, because I've completely lost track?
We've got about 20 minutes left, 19 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything from, it's a bit different, but anything from that clip that kind of struck you there?
again, that kind of sense of community, of connectedness, the building on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just jotting down actually as I was listening, because I've obviously listened to it a few times, but so words that I heard, trust was a big thing, mentioned that a few times, family, home, acceptance, community. Kat talked about my people, my friends. Shannon talked about, you know, when you're depressed or you're in a rut, having somebody, she wouldn't have gone on that morning. That was, I think that was 2 weeks ago. She wouldn't have gone to the group 2 weeks ago if Kat hadn't said, hey, are you coming? So you just see that power really of that friendship that's developing. Kat talked about the language issues. So for her, when she first came from Germany, she didn't really speak much English, and that was a huge thing for her. And I thought it was interesting. She says, not everyone can make the first step. And I think for me, that's really key. So if we get a referral, I will ring the woman who's been referred, have a bit of a chat, usually then go and visit her in her home. And then you can start to gauge what's the point of need? Where am I going to meet this person at in terms of their kind of level of need? For some people, I can say, we've got this really nice group on a Friday morning. Why don't you come? They might come, but to be honest, it's a big step going to a new place. Well, first of all, even getting up and going out of the house for some people is really hard, as I know you will know from the people that you work with. So then you might have to bring it back a bit. You might have to say, okay, there's a group, I'll meet you at the door. And that might be enough for some people, but again, not if you're too depressed to get up in the first place. So then it might be, let me introduce you to someone who can come and visit you in your home. So it's really about where is the point of need? Again, it's that need for sensitivity, that need to be able to work out with the person what would help at this point. It isn't always going to be like this, but at this point we can, I wouldn't put it like this, but we can really tailor make how we begin to help. So for those two mums that you've just heard, they're really doing well. They have down days, but you know, pretty much functioning. But the thing that I'm really pleased about is that they're recognising that not everybody is functioning, and they really want to help and do something about that. So we're just working on some training for them and some others who are saying, I really want to help. So we want to really empower them to be able to help more effectively. So that's just something that we're developing at the moment. Okay, back to the PowerPoint, please, Georgia. Okay, yeah, so I would never say it's not about services, but I would say it's usually not just about services. That I have lost count of the number of women that have said to me, oh, not another parenting course, really? Again, I think parenting courses can be great, but if that's all we can ever throw at somebody, we are missing it. So is it intervention or is it friendship? It's not either or. I think it's both and. And something that is a question for you, which I think we could just talk about again, just if we go back away from the PowerPoint, Georgia, where are the safe places where real friendships can be built in your local community? So I'd just be interested to hear, so the question is really, is what I'm saying, does it make sense? Does it kind of like, do you think it's something that is important? Do you think it kind of hits a chord, strikes a chord, I suppose, with you, is what I'm asking. And if it does, is there already something operating in your area? Could there be, or would you not know where to go? So I'd just be interested to kind of like have a bit of conversation around that. So does it strike a chord, first of all? There's a few nods. I can only see about 6 people, so there's a few nods there. So just in terms of, is there something similar? Are you already working like this? Because I don't want to assume that you're not. Or is there a need for something like this? Let's just hear from a few of you about that.
So I work for a small charity in Scotland called Held in Our Hearts, and we support families with baby loss and child loss. And we try to incorporate a very inclusive community, because often when parents lose a baby, they feel very isolated. It's a very lonely journey that they go on normally, especially once they're back in the community. So we hold groups, and we're just about to start our walk and talks again, where parents meet with a couple of our peer supporters and they go for a walk in nice areas, and they get the opportunity to be with other bereaved parents. So yeah, and we've just launched a new project called Hospital to Home, where there's workers now going in for losses between 14 and 24 weeks to provide support to families who lose their baby from the hospital back into the community, because that's where the lack of resources are.
It sounds amazing. Yeah. And are you finding it easy to get volunteers, Ailsa, to work with you?
So we have, I think we've got 16 paid staff, and we do have volunteers, but the Hospital to Home, the counsellors and the peer supporters are all paid staff at the moment.
Right. Yeah. Brilliant. Sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Else? Anyone else? No? Okay, that's fine. We can go back to the presentation. Thank you. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so this is my last slide. This is our contact details. This is where we're based. If you wanted more information, please do email me. Very happy to do that. I really don't think we know everything about this. I feel like even after the 20 years that we've been working, I feel like we're learning as we go, you know. There are a lot of things that we have learned, but I think there's still an awful lot more to learn. So I'd be really interested to hear from people who've got thoughts, ideas, questions. So please do feel free to get in touch with me. I hope that that's been helpful. I think, have we got, how much time now, Georgia? Sorry, I'm really bad at the timekeeping.
I think it's 10 minutes, 11 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so we've still got 10 minutes. We can't do breakout rooms within a breakout room, can we?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, all right. So maybe, I don't know, for the last 10 minutes, if anybody has anything that they wanted to share or to ask questions about, then we can do that, or just feel free to put something in the chat. But I'm very aware that I've just given an overview. So if there's any particular questions that would be helpful, then please do ask. Otherwise, what do we do if we're finished with 10 minutes to spare?
So do you get funding? Are you a charity?
Yeah, we are a charity, yes. Yeah. Okay. So we apply, So we apply for funding. So we're part of the Community Resources is the charity, and then we run particular projects within that charity. So we have some funding for the whole charity, and then sometimes we apply for specific projects as well. Yeah, so we apply to quite a lot of trusts, and also we've had lottery funding and lots of different types.
Yeah.
Presumably you do as well, Elsa.
Yeah, and I'm assuming because you'll be in the same boat because of the pandemic that and the cost of living, that it's getting harder to find trusts and grants and funding.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably fortunate in London because there is a lot out there.
Okay.
And at the moment, our local council is particularly proactive in working with the voluntary sector, so that's been really helpful. We work really closely with them, and we do get small pots of funding from them. And there are some cost of living grants out there, so it might be worth a look and see.
Yeah.
Because I think we can really argue that the cost of living is having a great impact on people's isolation.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's worth looking.
I know I was going to ask you something else that's gone out my head. Oh, and so do you recruit volunteers as well to help provide your services? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, most of the things that we run are volunteer led. So a lot of the, what we're trying to do is, so this whole thing about people don't just come with need, they come with solutions. That's a really big thing in the forefront of our minds. So when somebody comes along, to whether it's a new mum or anybody, if they are referred to us or they just walk in, the conversation we have with them initially when we fill out their contact forms with them is, you know, what do you like doing? What do you have to bring? What do you think you could share with others? Because I think it doesn't really, I mean, sometimes you are too depressed to be able to think beyond yourself.
Yeah.
But actually, most people do have dreams somewhere deep inside that you can help start to draw out a little bit. And so we really emphasize that, you know, what have you got to bring as well?
Yeah. And where do your referrals come from? And I heard you saying there about people just self-referring or walking in. So
so we wouldn't really, so referrals will come from mental health, from perinatal, from we've had midwives, health visitors, social care. But to be honest, the referrals come from the people who get it. So you might have a professional who is doing their thing and that's their focus, and they just don't really think it's very relevant what we do. But you will get someone like the psychotherapist I referred to at the beginning, who is already thinking like that, and she's looking for who else is out there. And I think what I'd be saying to all of you, to encourage you, who is out there, who's in your voluntary sector? Have you got a council that is really proactive in working with the voluntary sector? Because if you don't know where to go, maybe go to the council. Some councils are a bit, I was going to say a bit rubbish, that's a bit mean, but some councils don't really think like that. But some councils really recognise, particularly in these days, we can't do it. There's no money to do anything anymore. So therefore, the voluntary sector is going to have to be somewhere that we look. But not all voluntary sector groups are great. So you have to start to know what's around and find out what's around. Harika, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's a question and a bit of a reflection as well. Just in terms of sometimes we do get women that are quite sort of complex needs, and they've got some really difficult sort of history and interactions with services, so they can be quite difficult to sort of engage with services, understandably. And when we do refer them on to sort of these third sector organisations and charities, they do again find it difficult to engage with them. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of how the perinatal mental health teams can work best with these organisations to support that.
I think that's a really good point, and actually I should have said at the beginning, so this psychotherapist, she said, I'm not going to refer my complex ones to you, and that's a very good point. So I think we have to be careful. In the voluntary sector, we have to be careful that we don't think we know it and don't think we can manage those complex cases. So I would say that's something that really needs attention. And I don't have an answer to that. And we, I think, just come back to Ailsa's point. She said we get walk-ins in terms of referrals. So yeah, we wouldn't particularly think of those as referrals. They're people that are coming along to what we do and thinking, oh, this might be a nice place to go, and then we might find out that they've got some mental health needs or whatever, you know, but they're coming because we know we do lunches on a Wednesday, or they know that there's a nice group going on. So they're not kind of thinking I'm referring myself to something. They're just coming to something that's happening in the community, and then it might emerge that there's some quite complex needs there. So it can happen that way around as well. But I just think, yeah, I think if it's somebody with complex needs, there has to be some way of really remaining in touch with the services. Certainly with this particular psychotherapist, even though she wasn't referring the complex cases, there were still times I needed to be talking to her because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if something was, you know, important for her to be involved in, or, you know, but it certainly would be something that I didn't have the answer to. I don't really have an answer to that, Niharika. I think it's an issue, and I think there are voluntary sector organisations out there that might be more geared towards the more complex needs, but I think it'd be a case of finding them, and I think there's more work to do around that whole subject. Yeah.
And I think as well with very complex mental health, they have to be in a stage where they're ready to be able to engage in like your groups or your, you know, so that, I think that's where it becomes quite hard. But again, as you say, Sally, that's another very isolated group.
Yes, and it might be then that you do better by like a one-to-one approach, which is what we do sometimes. But then you have to be really careful about your volunteers. You have to really, they have to be skilled. They have to have training, and you need to have a lot of conversations about appropriate boundaries. And you do. It's a bigger thing, I think. I don't think that's not something we're doing at this stage. I see that there's a need, and I realise my answer isn't very satisfactory. Sorry.
Now, I can't speak. Sorry, I've got menopause brain. Up in Scotland, our charity, we work in collaboration with the perinatal mental health teams, so that's really good. We've got good relationships with them, so sometimes we work collaboratively when we're working with our families.
Yeah, I mean, I would say relationships are key every step of the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like anything, you know, it's even like when you're ringing to complain about something to the council, you know, you're trying to ring. It's much easier to talk to someone you know rather than this faceless person on the end of the phone line. And so we spend a lot of time trying to develop relationships with the council, with health, with whoever, so that we've got people that we can talk to rather than, you know, there's this team that deals with this. So I do think it's really important to build those relationships. Oh, we're going to be closing in 30 seconds. Just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to me. I hope it's really been helpful. Please do get in touch if you want to know any more or have any ideas or thoughts. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Okay, thank you. See you back in the main room.